Less than 2 years ago, Caleb Martin was cut by the Charlotte Hornets, seemingly ending his brief NBA career. A forgettable player that made little impact on the league and was just another guy that got some run in the G League but couldn't make it in the NBA. He just wasn't talented enough, not a good enough scorer, didn't bring enough to the table, and now he's won Eastern Conference Finals MVP. Okay, he didn't, but I think he should have. And he just made the NBA Finals, and the Heat could not have done it without him. A career 8-point-per-game scorer that was arguably the best player in a series that featured Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Jimmy Butler. Where did this guy come from? How do you go from being cut by the Hornets to starting for the Heat in the Eastern Conference Finals? Martin grew up in North Carolina before attending the prestigious Oak Hill Academy High School in Virginia, and he was a really talented young player. A 4-star recruit, Martin was 6'7", showed good scoring skills, and was a confident offensive player. He initially went to NC State, where he was a solid rotation player alongside his brother Cody, before transferring to Nevada, where things really started to take off for him. He won Conference Player of the Year as a junior and had an outstanding senior season before declaring for the 2019 NBA Draft. Going into the draft, things didn't look great, but he did have a small chance of going in the second round. Teams liked his size, length, and confidence, but he was seen as just another older prospect that probably wouldn't get much better at the NBA level, and there were also concerns about what was seen as a bit of a weird shooting form. Most teams were looking to take a big swing on a high upside prospect at that point in the draft, rather than someone that projected as a solid rotation player at best. And despite being a great scorer in college, he didn't have a ton of interest at the NBA level. Ultimately, he goes undrafted in 2019 and begins his NBA career as just a training camp invite for the Charlotte Hornets, who just selected his twin brother Cody in the second round. He did eventually make the roster, but spent the majority of his rookie season in the G League with the Greensboro Swarm, playing just 18 NBA games as a rookie. In his second season, he simply didn't look much like an NBA player. He played in more games, but his numbers left a lot to be desired, and despite some solid moments and being a really competitive player, the Hornets cut him in the summer of 2021 to make room on the roster for Kelly Oubre in free agency. Now, at this point, it seemed like Martin's NBA career could easily be over. He went undrafted, didn't make much of an impact in Charlotte, was old for a guy that had played less than 100 NBA games. Why would any team take a chance on him at this point? After all, if the Hornets cut you from the team, clearly you aren't bringing a ton of talent to the table. Well, this is where Martin's story gets really crazy. After being cut from the Hornets, he kept working out at a gym that was owned by North Carolina native J. Cole, who made a call to Heat assistant Caron Butler and connected him to Martin when he saw him working out. Butler invited Martin to come practice with the team, and he continued to impress the coaching staff while trying to earn a spot on the roster. And eventually, he was added to the team and joined the Heat for the 2021-22 season only because J. Cole saw him working out in a gym. And immediately, Martin showed a ton of improvement, so clearly J. Cole knew what he was looking at when he saw Martin working out. He became a 40% three-point shooter and a critical rotation piece to a Heat team that earned the 1 seed that season and made the Eastern Conference Finals, which was already an incredible turnaround considering where he was the year before. But in comparison to this year, Martin didn't make much of a playoff impact. That team had more depth on the wings. Guys like PJ Tucker and the at the time healthy Tyler Hero took up most of the minutes that Martin would normally occupy, and Martin barely played during the competitive portions of that series and watched from the bench as the Heat fell one Jimmy Butler shot short of a trip to the finals. At this point, Martin had made a huge jump in his NBA career though. He went from undrafted to making a team to the G League to real NBA player to real NBA contributor. Now the only thing that was left was to make an impact in the playoffs, to earn real rotation minutes in the most high-pressure situations the league has to offer. Which brings us to the 2022-23 season. The Heat weren't nearly as good, having lost guys like PJ Tucker in free agency and dealing with a ton of injury issues during the season. They asked a lot more from Martin, averaging nearly 30 minutes a game, but his overall efficiency suffered. The Heat had to earn their way into the playoffs through the play-in tournament, only narrowly defeating the Bulls in their final chance to make the postseason after losing to the Hawks. They entered the playoffs as the 8th seed with little hope to do anything in the East. But then, of course, Giannis got hurt in round 1 and the Heat took off. They take out the Bucks, pretty easily deal with the Knicks, and found themselves right back in the conference finals against the Celtics once again, just like Jimmy Butler said they would.
We had enough. Next year, we will have enough, and we're going to be right back in the same situation, and we're going to get it done.
But for Caleb Martin, this time was different. Tyler Hero broke his hand in round 1, and someone needed to step up to provide the scoring that the Heat desperately needed, and Martin, a guy who averaged 4 points per game in the playoffs the year before, stepped up into that role. Heading into the series against the Celtics, it was clear that the Heat were overmatched. Boston made the finals the year before and had the most complete roster in the league, while the Heat's rotation was half undrafted guys, including Martin, but immediately in the series, that was irrelevant. 3 threes, 15 points for Martin on the road to steal Game 1. 3 threes, 25 points to extend the series lead to 2-0 in Game 2. This was insane, and there was no way he was going to keep this up. Game 3, 4 threes, 18 points, and a blowout to earn a 3-0 series lead. 16 in a Game 4 loss, 14 in Game 5, starts in Game 6, plays 40 minutes, hits 4 threes, 21 points, and an absolutely crushing 1-point loss at home. But of course, he wasn't stopping there. He'd been there before, watched the year before in Game 7 as the Heat fell just short, and he didn't want to have that happen again. Game 7 in Boston, history on the line, a 3-game losing streak. The Heat once again needed Caleb Martin to step up. 45 minutes, 4 threes, and 26 points later, the Heat were in the NBA Finals. And just think about what that moment must have been like for Martin. Exactly 1 year before, he was watching the Eastern Conference Finals from the bench, helpless to do anything to push the Heat across the finish line. 2 years before, he didn't even have a spot on an NBA team. Now he just averaged 19 and 6 on ridiculous shooting in the Eastern Conference Finals, and the Heat needed every single bit of it to advance to the final round. Seriously, if Martin doesn't do what he did, the Heat are done. Even just an above average series from him does not work. They needed greatness, and that's what they got. The only reason the Heat beat Boston was because somehow Caleb Martin outplayed All-NBA Supermax eligible Jaylen Brown for an entire series. That is simply incredible. Not to mention that the only reason Martin is on the team is because J. Cole, of all people, saw him working out and made a call to Caron Butler. If he hadn't decided to stay in the gym to work on his game, or even had just gone to a different gym, none of this would be happening. If that call hadn't been to an organization like the Heat, he probably never gets this opportunity in the first place. If Tyler Hero is healthy, Martin doesn't play nearly as many minutes in the postseason, and without any one of those things, Martin doesn't play the way that he does, and the Heat don't make the finals. That is an incredible story of perseverance. It really did seem like the NBA was just going to be a dream for Caleb Martin. He could have quit when the Hornets cut him. He could have listened to everyone else that said he was too old, not a good shooter, wouldn't improve much in the NBA. He could have just gone on with his life knowing that it just wasn't meant to be. But instead, he earned himself a new opportunity, got himself a nice new contract with the Heat, and was the hero of the conference finals. He certainly wasn't the only undrafted player to make a big impact for Miami, but he was the most consistent. The guy that whenever they needed a big shot, someone to end a run, someone to hit a big 3 to quiet the crowd, that could go on an 8-0 scoring run by himself, all from a player that was simply let go by one of the worst organizations in the league. At the time, I'm sure it was really frustrating to get cut from Charlotte, but in hindsight, it was the best thing for Caleb Martin's career. What a difference 2 years can make.